How you doing, folks? Welcome to feedback video for week 10. Thanks for sending over your work, relatively short notice as well, so I appreciate that. What's really enjoyable about the work that I can see over the last couple of weeks in particular is they're looking more solid. Your volume and your form suggests weight and substance and three-dimensionality, and I think having that extra time to focus on not just proportions, of course, but tone, shading, and it really shows, and it's really nice to see. It's really nice to see that progress in a relatively short period of time. So looking forward to having a look at these and seeing how you get on. Nice one. And we're off. Okay, nice one. Yeah, this is a lovely drawing. You've got a really nice angle on the shoulders there. Your neck into your trapezius, into your shoulder, that's got a really believable, accurate fluid motion to it. Nicely done. It's something you could easily take for granted, but there's a really subtle angle on that, and I think you've really nailed it. There's a lovely sense of weight and form, the shadows in the inside of the arm, underneath the breast and the other arm. There's a sense of three-dimensionality there. Same with the bottom of the stomach. You've by having a lighter area here and a deep shadowy area underneath, that contrast pushes this arm forward, and it actually helps to bring the foreshortening of the knee forward as well. So nicely done on that. And actually there's a lovely sense of a subtle angle on the torso as opposed to the angle on the hips. So that opposing angle gives it a lovely finesse, I think, for lack of a better word. There's this wonderful, elegant subtlety to it. So really nicely done on that. And you can see that you're starting to figure out your shadow shapes on the knee, but the muscles, how the shadows inform the shape of the muscles and the general contour of the figure. So yeah, I think you've pretty much nailed that pose. I'm wondering if that foot is a little bit small, just ever so slightly. I think that foot, even though there's a little bit of foreshortening there, I think that would probably be a little bit bigger. Certainly in length, if not in width. This hand is a little bit on the large side, which is tricky. I do realize there was a little bit of foreshortening there as well. I would say maybe just take that up a notch, and giving your thumb a little bit more flexibility in the shape of it. It's a little bit stiff, but yeah, it's out by a little bit. With the hair, I would say don't get too bogged down in detail. So get your overall shape, as I mentioned in class, the overall contour, and just block the whole thing in. Block the whole thing in, then maybe a couple of directional lines to suggest flow, and maybe get a bit of a putty rubber and just pull out a couple of highlights here and there, and maybe a couple of rogue hairs at the base, so it's not just a blocky form, although initially I suggest doing that, and then it gives you a little bit more life and an illusion of detail. And just be careful that your nose isn't too long. I would bring that nose up a little bit further, and you could probably get away with pushing your mouth up just ever so slightly as well, and it'll be a little bit more in proportion. But all in all, lovely drawing. This is a lovely drawing. I know you didn't seem too impressed with it when you sent the email over to me, but it actually reminds me a little bit of a Renaissance drawing. one of those really beautiful studies that they do. We all know what I mean by that. I think when I say it, it does have that lovely sense of weight to it. It does have again a certain sense of elegance to it. The very subtle shading adds more three-dimensionality to it. I would like to have seen you go a little bit darker in around this leg here, the upper thigh, just because by darkening that area in there, by going a little bit darker, it'll help push this knee forward. It'll create a higher contrast. And wherever you've got a high sense of contrast, which what I mean by that is a strong combination of light and dark. So for example, there's a deep dark in there, and there's a pretty bright light here. There's a deep dark potentially in here, a fairly bright light there. That high contrast helps to bring the lighter areas forward and push the darker areas back, and just creates the illusion of more depth. You've got probably needing a little bit more of a curvature on the neck there, as that neck leads down into the shoulder, and maybe just a little bit more on the shoulder there. It seems to be a little bit abrupt on that side. That's a very minor issue, but yeah, probably cut short a little bit too soon. Again, a lovely angle on the upper torso in relation to the hips. There's a beautiful opposing kind of angle on that. Lovely foreshortening there. I would say just it's just this here, this lower leg, I would say protrudes a little bit too far. If you just soften that edge and curve it round into the knee, you've got it. That's it. It's just such a small little change, but I think it'll make a big difference to the foreshortening on that, and the softness of the pose, and how that leg wraps around into the lower leg. The knee, sorry, wraps around into the lower leg. Beautiful angle on your arm there. That's really, really nicely done. I would like to see you create a little bit more of a deeper shadow on the opposite breast there, which again brings the nearest one forward, again creating that high contrast. A lovely suggestion of the hair. Maybe the hairline's a little bit too high, so just cut that off a little bit, just a small bit. I think your proportions with your head in relation to the body are pretty strong, in fairness. It's just maybe the hairline's a little bit too high, so I just shave off a little bit of that. I think your angle on this leg's really nicely done as well. I think maybe this needs to soften up. I think maybe there's a little bit of sheet or cloth actually overlapping a little bit of the leg there, and I think that might be good, because it'll soften out that limb curves down a little bit too far. So by just raising a little bit of either shave off the leg by drawing a thinner version, or have a little bit of the sheet overlapping, so it takes that bit out, and you've got a beautiful drawing there. Yeah, really nice. These are a couple of really nice studies. It's just a couple of little things I'd look out for. Because of the slight angle of that pose, I think your shoulders are a little bit too wide. So if we, especially with the size of the head as well, if we widen out that neck just a little bit, just a fraction, it does tuck in behind the ear like you've done. You can widen that out, and I think the length of this shoulder is fine. It's this one. This one's a little bit too far. I would say your shoulder needs to drop down around there into the arm. So you're having to move that across. So if we move the breast across a little bit, just adjusting the whole thing, which is not a big as change as it sounds, to be honest with you. It's made to sound a little bit more dramatic than it is. You're just moving that across. It's not a stress, and you've got room for that arm to drop down a little bit sooner and to fall into that lovely pose that where you've got it draping across the belly like that. See what I mean? By shaving off that shoulder, your head looks in proportion now, and the rest of the figure is drawn really well. So it's just that. It's funny, isn't it? Just a small change like that, everything else falls really nicely into place. You've got a lovely angle on your lower foot there, on the left leg, right as we look at Geeta's left leg. It did have that subtle little angle on it, which you captured beautifully. I would say maybe this lower leg curves into the upper leg to create that little overlap, and then you got that. I would just widen out the base of that upper leg just a little bit so it flattens out as it sits on that chair. Yeah, the hands were tricky. I think you're right to simplify them, generally speaking. You can simplify them and then come back to them if you've got time. But that was tricky. Just be careful that they're not too small. I do realize there was a bit of foreshortening on that though, so you'd probably overlap that hand a little bit. Might be on the small side just a tad, and this area here was at a little bit more of an angle, I think. And you might, by doing that, by angling the elbow and the lower arm, it creates the foreshortening that you need to give it that believable sense of of the angle of it. And this one here, yeah, again, you've captured that lovely lean that Geeta had. It was that opposing kind of center of balance in relation to the hips. So well done on that. That's nicely observed. I like how you've suggested your hands there. I would just say maybe just extend that mitten shape a little bit more to suggest the fingers themselves as opposed to just the back of the hand. But generally, I think the shape and the size are good in relation to the head. And that's the way to do it. You remember that the hand covers the face, not the head, but it's about the length of the face. So when you lose your way, at least you've got that as a little guide to fall back on. Just be careful that the angle of your shoulders if they're not too pointy, they're not overstated. I think this one serves it better because of the angle of that arm, but the upper arm tends to curve more an angle like that, as I remember. I'm pretty sure. The length of your upper arm and your lower arm, spot on. Really good continuity on that. Just make sure that your neck is not too skinny. Give that a little bit more width so it holds the head. And I would say just put, by the way, I really like that you're putting an arc to suggest the angle of your eyes. Good, fair play to you on that. Remember that your nose and your mouth are following the same arc. You can simplify that shape generally, and if you want, you can just put a little shape, just an outline for the hair. I think Geeta's hair was up actually for that pose, if I remember correctly. But you can just put a little simple shape, and it just adds a little bit more body and just one smaller little detail. I think the angle of your shoulder is a little bit too wide there, considering the 3/4 view. So maybe you've got a lovely angle running down into your shoulder. I would say just a little bit more subtlety on that, and it probably curves in a little bit sooner. And just maybe a little bit more of an angle, softened angle on the breast. But generally speaking, yeah, just just your shoulder. I think that's the main issue with those. Just your shoulder, the angle of that, and making sure your hands aren't too small, and just that little bit of a foreshortened angle on that lower arm there. Cool, nice studies. All right, you got a good strong angle on the shoulders. This is the pose that I've just covered actually. As with a lot of your drawings, it's the head. Your technique is very strong when it comes to drawing the figure, generally speaking. Your angle, the looseness of your line for arms and legs, the way you draw the torso, it's all good work. It's just being mindful of your head size. I wonder, would it help for you to just put a suggestion of your neck first, then draw the bean shape, drawing the figure, and then drawing your head, because then you've got the body as a strong guide to help you, as opposed to you drawing the head first, and then you start to kind of lose focus on that and draw the figure. I wonder if you did it in reverse, would it help? Just an idea, but it's happening regularly, so I wonder if you change your technique. But again, if we take that away, you know, you've got a lovely drawing there. You've got a really strong, again, your contours, your proportions of the rest of the body are usually spot on. It's your head. Just be careful as well, though, with your neck. That little slope for the shoulders. A little bit more of a slope there. And I think maybe, see, I'm judging it on the size of that head, so your shoulders would need to be wider. If your head was smaller, I would still say I would bring that angle out a little bit more. So you've got more room for the neck to curve in behind that shoulder. And I love the fact that you're suggesting your clavicle there, so you've got a lovely little triangle shape, curves down, and then a little bit more of a bump. You don't need to overstay it, but just a little bit more of a bump and a little bit wider there, so you've got a little bit more angle on the shoulder. But that's it. That's the main thing. That's fine. Just watch your head size. I love this study. I really do. I think it's so stylistically beautiful. It reminds me of, I remember saying in class, it reminds me a little bit of Aubrey Beardsley, or several comic book artists I can think of. It's got that beautiful light-dark contrast. It's very strong. But because of that, it gives the figure a lovely sense of volume and weight and substance. It really has a three-dimensionality to it. And I actually love the kind of blocky, stylistic, loose interpretation of the shadows as well. It just lends itself to pen and ink. I love the fact that you're experimenting. You know, you're trying out different mediums. Now, when I wrote down the list of materials for this course, I never put things like pastel, pen and ink. I just kept it nice and simple. The reason I did that is I just didn't want you to have to spend lots of money on materials. I wanted to keep the cost of materials down. However, if you do have pen and ink or pastel, stuff like whatever, you know, if you want to try out new mediums, please, I do welcome it. Like I said, I just didn't add those on the list because I didn't want you to think you had to go out and spend loads of money on stuff. I wanted to keep it quite modest. But if you want to try other stuff, please do, and let this be an inspiration for that. You know, because pen and ink, it's intimidating, I suppose. You know, you make a mistake and it's there forever, but so what? This is the place to do it. You know, I encourage mistakes. You know it's going to happen. You know it's part of the process. It's a part of the learning curve. So who cares? You know, I think the more you do a course like this where it's quite quick fire. You know, how many drawings have you done already? And it's week 10. You know, you've probably done dozens and dozens and dozens of drawings already in the first few weeks probably. So what's another drawing? Who cares? You know, try out stuff, experiment, and yeah, I'm getting a little bit off track, but yeah, I just love the fact that you're not worrying about mistakes and you're just going for it, and I think this drawing is a wonderful indication of that. And I love the fact that you're sinking edges, you're losing edges into darkness, and that also gives the figure more solidity. Yeah, I just love this drawing. Really nicely done, and may your experimentation continue. Okay, I think, yeah, another case of head's too big. I suggested drawing the body first and then adding the head after. I know that might be a little bit weird because I've always suggested it's a good idea to start with the head. That's not necessarily something set in stone though. That's what I like to do. That's how I work. So it's not to say that it's bad practice to do it the other way around. Everyone finds their way that works for them. I've got to stress that. Anything that I've shown you during this course, it's how I've learned to do it. It's kind of a method or a process that's comfortable for me, and I'm just passing that on. But you may well find other ways of doing it, and I wonder if you did the body first, would that help? The other thing is to do your cranial units. So remember, a cranial unit is roughly, the top of the cranium just below the nose, roughly speaking. And a cranial, if we did our line of action, going right through the center of the clavicles, where the clavicles meet, in between the breasts, down through the belly button, etc. That's the line of action separating the sides into an equal length, equal sides. Cranial unit, roughly speaking, either side of that gives you the width of the shoulders. Approximately. Yeah, it needs to be wider. They need to be wider. The body's too small, and just be careful that your hands aren't too small either. And I think you could take your if we've got our cranial unit and we've got that wedge shape coming down for the lower part of the face, this roughly, the forehead to the bottom of the chin is roughly your hand. So that is going to be much bigger, but you can use that as a guide. But yeah, the cranial unit thing is an approximation. Remember that. But your shoulders definitely could do it coming out a lot wider to fit the size of that head. Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, again, it just really strongly reminds me of Egon Schiele or Aubrey Beardsley. It's got a lovely stylistic quality to it, and I love the variation in the thickness of your line and the subtle marks to suggest tone. Yeah, really, really nicely done. I think I mentioned this in class, so no mystery here. The eye's a little bit too big, but you know, even though the eye's too big, and probably the back of the head doesn't go back far enough, as in the hair probably bulges out a little bit further. You've got your neck there, which is fine, by the way, the positioning of it, I mean. But you're going to have the back of your cranium here, so the back of that hair is going to come back further still. So yeah, you could have a little bit more of a width on that. But anyway, as I was saying, even though the eye is not the right size, because it's so heavily stylistic, it kind of feels like it works, if that's not too much of a counterintuitive or a bit of a contradiction. But the eye is a little bit big, and maybe the nose is just a little bit flat against the face, just maybe a little bit more of a rounded nose tip, and you've got it. Cool, nice one. This is lovely. Yeah, really nicely done. You've got some lovely shape on your eyes. You've got a beautiful shape to the nose that flows back into the bridge of the nose and up into the forehead. So really nicely done. I like how you've done the lips. The fact that the top lip is a little bit darker and the bottom lip catches more of the light. It gives it a little bit more solidity. It gives it a little bit of a stronger sense of form. I actually really like how you've interpreted the flowers. I think I joked about it in class that it's like you had a couple of minutes left and you just got them in there at the end. But it kind of matches I like the contrast between how refined the drawing is here, but how loose and stylistic you've interpreted the hair and the flowers. There is quite a nice contrast to that. It works, not to get too arty-farty about it, but I would say that your forehead needs to come up a little bit further, and that would raise the general height of your head. It just there should be a little bit more on that, but it's an easy change to make. And I would say the back of your head, and just bring that shoulder back a little bit further. The back of your head, so that might be the back of the cranium, roughly speaking. So I would say your hair comes out a little bit further, like that. Just make a little bit more width on it. But yeah, I love how you've interpreted the eyes. That's really nicely done. You've captured an essence of Geeta, her likeness. So well done on that. Yeah, a little bit. You've got a nice flow on that. I maybe just curve that a little bit more. Lovely shape on your nostril there, and that lovely curve down into your lip. Maybe just give that center part a little bit more force there. And I would say that your lower lip just comes out a little bit too far. It's a little bit further in, I'm pretty sure, and that will bring your jawline in just a smidge. But the length of your jaw is fine. Just make sure the angle of your neck is at a little bit more of an angle, more like that, and then you've got more room for your shoulder. Comes down at an angle. Job done. Lovely work. Yeah, really nice. This is a nice drawing as well. Again, you've got that. Oh, sorry, I knocked that. My accent. I just love the angle on the leg. You know, that lovely sense of weight, and I love how it cuts across there. You've really captured that. I would say, yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. With your lower leg, with the calf, that actually overlaps the upper leg area. So it's got a little bit of a curve. Actually, it's quite a little subtle S shape there. That will overlap, and then you've got the upper part of the leg just underneath. So just a small little detail. I don't mean to be pedantic. It's just a small little thing. I think it's just the angle of the shoulders. The shoulders feel a little bit stiff. They seem very rigid. I would say that the neck overlaps. It comes down here, and you do have a nice angle on that, but I think it's too wide. I reckon that your shoulder starts there, so it starts a lot sooner, which brings that arm down a little bit more of an angle. Remember, the hips are wider than the shoulders, so that's where you're being cut out there a little bit. And I would say this shoulder as well probably starts a little bit sooner as well. And with your foreshortening here, you've got a lovely overlap there. It's just that that arm is at a little bit more of an angle, and that gives it the nice sense of width for your foreshortening. And I think that wrist starts a little bit sooner, and again emphasizes your foreshortening. So that's going to be a lot shorter there. And see what I mean by bringing that shoulder in? You can see that, I'm hardly covering that much, but you can see how it's got more of a sense of the three-quarter view on it now. And just maybe by bringing in that arm, you see, the breasts now can move in, because that is your clavicle line, that's your center line, and so on. So we can bring those in a little bit further, and so on, and just moving it slightly. But generally speaking, you've captured a lovely sense of the pose. The proportion of your head with that shoulder moved in is absolutely fine. I like the fact you're suggesting that the face features. I would say keep the nose simple. I will do a little demonstration when it comes to drawing features. I'll just go over those again, but keep that nose relatively simple, especially with that distance and with so much else going on. Just a little curve like that, and maybe a suggestion of a nostril, but really keep it very minimal. And then the mouth could be just a little parting, the center and the the lower lip, just a little curve for that, and that's probably enough to carry that. All right, nice one. Lovely. Okay, now we've got a nice sense of proportion with the head, with the rest of the figure. It's a tiny bit too big, but it's definitely not as conspicuous as some of the other ones. So nice one. That's good to see. It's just a couple of little things. You can suggest a little bit of the curve of the neck leading down into your collarbone, and you might just be able to put a little bit of a softer angle on that shoulder because of it, and just a little bit more of a bump for the shoulder, which puts it at a little bit more of a swing of an angle like that. And by widening that, it fits more in the proportions of the head. I would say bring your eyes down just a tad, by the way. Just a tad, bring them down like that. And then your nose is there, and it's more in tandem with that. Anyway, I digress. That's beautiful. Beautiful line for your elbow. Curves down into the wrist. And I remember that you couldn't see that hand. It was obscured by the opposite leg, the thigh. Just bring that out a little bit more. I think that knee needs to come out a little bit further. It's a little bit on the short side. And again, probably darkening that area in there, and darkening this area here will create more depth and bring that opposite leg forward. And a little bit of shadow on that knee as well. See what I mean? By darkening that, It really helps to push that arm forward. And I'd probably go and darken all of that area there. It was quite a lovely, there was some really nice shadow. There was some lovely shadow shapes in the poses on Tuesday. And by darkening here, it helps to create more sense of weight and depth. Yeah, so this area here just comes up a little bit higher, I think. A little bit higher there. That's lovely. That's really nicely done. The foreshortening on that area is really beautiful. I'd probably just bring that up a little bit higher, just a smidge. Leading down, and your foot starts a little bit there. So started too soon there. Goes back there. I think there was a little bit of overlap with the blankets. Nice little bit of shadow there, but not as dark as your shadow in here. And a little bit of a half tone there. And you're creating a little bit more depth. This here comes out a little bit further to support that breast on the opposite side, or sorry, above, and creates a nicer dynamic there. And with your wrist, you can just put a little ball joint, for that, and you can do your, which is suggested, your mitten shape, and just soften that area out there a little bit. And for your thumb, so let me do that again. See, joint, and then it curves in. Little F shape there for the inside of the thumb to simplify. All right, nice one, good work. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much into this because I can see that you're obviously experimenting. You're trying out new things, and what I will say is I think the composition is really beautifully done. You've got a lovely sense of how you've used that space, and actually cropping the top of the head works in terms of the composition, so nicely done. Just nice to see you playing around, experimenting, shape, line, but also just a little flashes of color here and there. It's really interesting, and again, that really reminds me of Egon Schiele. Very controversial artist, Egon Schiele. Proceed with caution when you're looking at his work, but yeah, it does remind me a little bit of the energy and the boldness and the looseness that he gets into his line of his figure studies. Yeah, cool, nice one. Good to see, just good to see experimentation. Yeah, I think you've really captured the essence of the pose, which in fairness is you do. A little bit too big. Just on the tad on the large side. So it's just finding a way of reining in your head size. So you've got just a little bit more of a flow down into that arm. A little bit more of a flow to curve it, and then you got your hand on top. I just make that a little bit bigger, just a tad. A little bit more of an angled flow down into the shoulder. Beautifully done with the arm. Just such a lovely curved line down into the wrist. I love how you've simplified the hand. The hand is too small for that head, but don't worry about that. In relation to the rest of the figure, it's only out by just the smallest amount. But actually actually how you've simplified it is really beautifully done. It's got a lovely shape and elegance to it. So just making that just slightly bigger. And this knee, there was a lot more foreshortening on that because it was protruding. It was sticking out towards us. That would be a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger there. And a little bit of a curving into the hips. That kind of shape. And this lower leg protruding out a little bit further. And the opposite knee right underneath. And then it curves back away like that. So just making that a little bit more prominent because it's coming towards us, and we won't worry about the head size. We'll just look at the figure and see what I mean. That definitely needs to be bigger. A little bit more of a curve there actually. And that fits a lot nicer in relation to the upper body, the torso and the arms, stuff like that. Cool, nice one. Okay, yeah, no, again, a good sense of the pose. Lovely angle on that lower leg. Beautiful shape on that lower leg. And that's the overlap I was talking about before. That little overlap there, and nicely done. And that kind of bulging calf muscle and curving down into your ankle. And the shape of your foot, nicely done, well observed. That looks spot on to me in relation to the rest. Maybe your head's a little bit squished. If we were to add just a little bit more onto your head there, it might even be just a case of kind of making the hair a little bit bulkier, and that should bulk out the overall size in general. Just be careful with that. It's a little bit rigid, a little bit straight. Remember, we're always dealing with our curves and our S shapes, our C shapes are such wonderful guides to get us up and running. See what I mean about just curving that in and following the topography of the muscles and the general shape of the leg. It's a little bit more organic, shall we say. Maybe that's really nicely done actually. That's got a nice lovely sense of the curve from the torso into the hips. It's nicely done. Just be careful with your foreshortening there. There's a little bit more of an angle on that, and that angle gives you the foreshortening, and the wrist starts a little bit sooner, and then you've got your hand there. All right. That's got a nice angle, and you've got a nice sense of the elbow there. I like the fact that you're using charcoal, by the way, charcoal pencil. It's not easy, but it's got a real kind of looseness to it, a boldness to it. Just be careful that your hands not too small. Hands a little bit on the small side there. And just a little bit more of a curve from the neck into the trapezius, into the shoulder, which has got just a little bump there, where the clavicle meets the shoulder. And yet, just sitting there, just a little bit more of a slope, a little bit more of an angle, and then that bump into your shoulder, and just a little bit more of a sense of contour. Just be careful that limbs aren't too stiff. Instead of this, a bit more of a flow, a bit more of a organic. Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing it. A bit more of an organic shape to it, and just making sure you've got a little bit more of an angle on your clavicles. By having that angle on your clavicles, I think it encourages you more to get that little bump on the shoulder. You know what I mean? And then angle your trapezius in there. All right, nice one. Okay, so again, really like the angle on the torso in relation to the hips. That's lovely. It's really nicely done. It's nice to see that you're playing around with tone now as well. It does give the drawing more presence. You know, it just, line has its place and it's fine, but line combined with tone, that's where you get that lovely sense of three-dimensionality. That's what really gives a drawing. It's pulling you off the page, you know, really making it look like it's got that lovely sense of volume and mass. Just be careful your hand's not too big. That is a little bit on the large side. And just angle that leg a little bit more, so that upper leg just a little bit more of an angle. It cuts across there, and that gives that arm something to kind of lean on here, and then that wrist drops down behind that, and just maybe angle that and round that off a little bit more. I think there was a little bit of sheet overlapping there, and just watch your angle on that. It's coming down a little bit more. That leg is that knee's too high up in relation to here. That knee comes down past this one, so it's on a different plane here as opposed to here. If you can see that here and here. So whereas you've got it on the same one, and that means that we can straighten that out a little bit. Lovely shape there, by the way, and this comes out more like that. Like that. See what I mean? Oh, sorry, I made that a little bit too big. But yeah, that just needs to come down a little bit, come down to here, and you've got it then, and it's got more room for that nice bit of foreshortening on the hips there, and you've got it. And just again that little bit of a bump at the shoulder. And if for features, if you find you don't have a lot of time, you can just put that kind of little shadow shapes, little marks, little hollows of tone to suggest some of the features. If you're finding you're not having a lot of time to put those in, yeah, just finding an angle on your shoulder, on your trapezius into your shoulder, will take the stiffness out of that as well. Cool, nice one. Okay, nice one. So some really nice tonal work there. Lovely angle on the shoulders and the arm. That's really nicely done. I would say you've lost your neck a little bit. So if we had a little bit more of an angle, a little bit more of a curve leading up to the neck, and then you've got your head. So you've got a little bit of neck shown. So it can angle down into that shoulder. Okay. And just be careful. I think your hip is a little bit too high in relation to your shoulder. With this pose, I reckon we're moving that right down there. How you've drawn your leg, the actual shape of this pose is absolutely fine. With, like I said, with the exception of leaving out the neck, you've got a really strong sense of the pose. You've got a lovely sense of weight and heaviness for the figure, where you've got some lovely tonal work. That's really nice. Some really strong contrasts in there which adds body to it. Yeah, I think, because I remember that it was a little bit of a curve where you had your foreshortening just before the knee, around the knee area, and then your leg. Something like that. Because the knee was forward of the body, and that gives more room for stomach. Got another angle. The leg below the knee was underneath each other. Well, it was underneath that, and then it angled underneath like that. Something to that effect. But yeah, generally it was more of an angle like that as opposed to straight across. So just moving that forward, and you've got a nail. All right, nice one. Nice one. Yeah, another strong drawing. Good sense of the pose. Like how you're starting to put in some tone. It's starting to give it more body. It's starting to really shape it out, and starting to look at how the shadow describes muscle, describes the contours of the figure. So some really nice stuff happening in there. Just be careful your hand's not too small. It's just a teeny bit on the small side, I'd say. Get away with that being a decent amount bigger. That hand was kind of hard to see. It was fairly obscured. There was a fair bit of foreshortening on it, but it seems again a little bit on the small side there. Some lovely shadow in there, which helps to bring this area forward, add more depth. You got a really nice angle on the arm. That shoulder's nicely done. A little bit of a bump, and then a curve into our trapezius, into our neck. Nice shape on the hair. Maybe give it a little bit more of a contour, a little bit more of a flow. Maybe extend the top of that just a tad. Yeah, it's this bit here. I reckon, again, you've got the angle slightly off. I remember this is coming forward a lot more. Foreshortening of the knee here. And breathing down. And then we've got that lovely curve for the hips. Lovely curve into the torso there. See what I mean? So that was coming forward a lot more. And if I put that in red, then that'd be easier. And because of that, this leg underneath is at a little bit of an angle. The knee, I remember, was right underneath the upper knee, and then it curves back a little bit more of an angle like that. So it's mainly that area there. But not to say that your drawing wasn't in proportion. It's just I think the angle's a little bit out, and this was protruding a little bit forward, and just watch the size of your hands. All right. Yeah, another drawing with a really lovely, strong sense of tone. And again, to emphasize how much stronger in terms of form and three-dimensionality, it really adds so much. So it's really nice to see. And yeah, I think you can really get what I mean about the emphasis of how shadows follow the shape, the contour, the three-dimensionality of the form. It describes form, and also high contrast. That lovely shadows in here, in here, in here. It helps to make those lighter areas really come forward, and adds just a lovely sense of depth. I think your knee needs to come down more at an angle and then wrap itself around there. Something like that. See what I mean? It just, that knee comes across a little bit further. It's pretty much in line with the head, with the face. Beautiful angle on your arm, your shoulder, beautiful shape to it. You've got a really nice sense of the neck leading up into face. It's a little bit on the small side there, I think. Yeah, just maybe a little bit looser with the hair, a little bit more of a flow, a little bit, few bumps, a little bit, yeah, just generally looser. Really like how you simplified that hand, by the way. That was tricky. I think that leg curves in a little bit too soon. It's probably a little bit more at an angle, like that. Beautiful, beautiful tonal work there, by the way. It makes that lovely fleshy area with the crease of the leg come forward, and you've got a lovely sense of form and mass on that knee. Beautiful tonal muscle structure there. It's really nicely done. And generally there's just a lovely sense of weight on the figure. And yeah, just be careful of that knee. I think it came across more of an angle and it was in line with the head. Lovely drawing though, really strong work. All right, nice one. So these are lovely. These are really nice drawings. I'm just wondering if we could add a little bit more onto the top of the head, and maybe we could place our ear a little bit higher and take it up a notch. By taking it higher, we can raise it a little bit as well. Really nice suggestion of the hair in the back of the head there. Your neck, I think maybe curve that lower neck a little bit more there, a little bit more of a curve, and then of course leading down into your shoulders. I like your interpretation of the lips. You've got a nice little bit of foreshortening there, lovely suggestion of the fleshiness at the bottom of the lip without connecting it up and making it look too fake. Nice foreshortening on your eyes. Really, yeah, really well observed. You've got a good continuity to the angle of the eyes, the nose and the mouth. That's all really nicely done, well observed. And I like how you simplified your eyes and how the lid drops down over the iris, the pupil, and just simplifying the nose, but also still you've got a nice angle on it. You know, you've got a nice sense of the detail of the nose there. So yeah, really well observed on that. And this one is also a really nice drawing. I think you've got a really lovely interpretation of the hair. I'd say block the whole thing in, block it all in, and then use a putty rubber to pull out some of the light. Yeah, I would say that's a better technique, but yeah, it's up to you how you do it at the end of the day. Got a nice shape on your neck. The neck feels a little bit skinny. I wonder if we were to just add just a fraction onto the back of the neck there. I think the placement of the front of your neck is fine. and we can then just widen the shoulders ever so slightly. Lovely angle on that, by the way. Really nicely done. A little bit more of a bump there, just a tad. It's minimal, but just a bit of a bump. Got a nice angle on your jaw. Really like how you've drawn your eye. The nose seems a little bit flat. We just add a little bit more of a roundness, a bump on the nose there. And curve that nose into your upper lip a little bit stronger. And then the lower lip is at a bit more of an angle. And you've got a nice shape on your chin. Nice one. I really like how you've interpreted the flowers as well. I like the looseness of it. Just suggestive rather than getting bogged down in too much intricacy. Well done. Good work. Okay, I'm just going to finish up with a couple of simple ways that I showed you how to do features. A lot of the time, features, they're a little bit at a distance, and sometimes it's hard to kind of make out certain details, but a couple of ways of simplifying the eye, for example. A little bit of a curve and then a little bit of angle. So it's not just a C shape. It's got a little bit more subtlety than that. We've got a little curve at the eye. And the lower is a little bit more of a curve as opposed to the angle of the top one. And your eye, unless the person is startled, it's that upper lid is always going to drop over maybe a third or a quarter of the eye, maybe a third of the eye. And then your pupil can simply be a little crescent shape to suggest that a little light is catching it, for example. And you can suggest the lower lid, just a little, underneath the lower lid and above. This is if it's relevant, if you can actually see it. A little bit of the skin of the top of the lower lid. And remember, if your eye is at an angle, if it's more of a 3/4 view, you're dealing with ellipses, not circles. Okay. Yeah. Bit of a slight ellipse shape. As opposed to your circle shape. If we can call that a circle. But yeah, you get what I mean. Just keep that in mind if you've got the 3/4 view. Okay, with your nose. So if we have that visor shape running down the front of the face, I'm just going to simplify everything here. The nose can be interpreted as a kind of triangle shape initially. You can put a little circle at the top, so it reminds you of the kind of bulbous qualities of it. The bridge of the nose, a little indent. Now, depending on the individual's nose, could be have a little bump, it could be straight. You're just connecting up that shape. Now, curve there. For the nostril, in a profile view, little curve. Just a little curve like that. And then imagine that line and little gap, and continue the flow of it without continuing the line in its entirety. Curve it round over and above And you got a simple nose shape in profile, nice and easy. And sometimes you've got that wrinkle or that crease that comes down at an angle. But yeah, that's a detail you don't have to get too bogged down in. Right, now that I've got my profile view in motion, I might as well do the eye. So the eye, it's going to be a little bit further back from the edge, from the bridge of the nose, and I tend to put, imagine a thorn or a tip of a spear or an arrowhead shape on its side, and your eyeball is at a little bit of an angle. Your upper lid, and there's a line cutting across that, and you can put in your eyelashes if you want, nice and loose, and a little bit the lower lid, it's at a little bit of an angle as well, and your eyebrow, of course, it sits above it, a little tick, almost a little tick shape, like that. A nice one. Okay, moving on from that. So down into your lip, just curve. Bottom of the nose curves into the upper lip, I should say. How far does the mouth go? In line with the eye. Suggestion of the upper lip, a little bit of tone. And not always, but a lot of the time, the bottom lip isn't in line. It's a little bit of an angle, a little bit lower. Curve, and then flow into your chin. And for the bottom lip, I just put a little line so I don't connect it, and it looks a little bit fleshier and a little bit more realistic. The nose from the front, you can put again that kind of bulbous shape. Imagine the center of your bulbous shape is either side of the nose. Little curve. You can connect that area up if you want, depending on the person. And either side, two brackets almost. And you've got a simplified nose. Sometimes I think it's a good idea not to draw both sides of the nose. It can look a little bit contrived. So just maybe suggest one side, maybe one that's in more shadow, and just put that one in, as opposed to drawing both sides of it, which again, yeah, can look a little bit contrived. And the 3/4 angle of your nose. I'm going to still put that circle shape in. Just going to put an angled diagonal line for the bridge of the nose just for now. Curve for the nostril. Little bracket or angled C shape. Lock that in. Depends on the nose, it might be a little bump. And the other side of it suggested. That's your 3/4 angle, or one way of doing it anyway. Can you perhaps suggest that bridge of the nose there? Be careful with drawing that in, because I think it's better to suggest it with tone rather than line. But yeah, that's up to yourself. Depends on the 3/4 angle how much. Sometimes you might even see the opposite nostril, or you might just see a little hint of it. Again, it just depends on how pronounced the 3/4 view is. So your eye in profile, your nose in profile, your lips in profile. Eye, front view, slightly 3/4 view. So you've got your ellipse, front nose, 3/4 nose, and your lip. First thing I do with the lip, draw in the center, where the two lips meet, that line, that dark line. Then I draw in the kind of Cupid's bow. First I draw in that curved center, and then angle each side of that. Corners of the mouth. And sometimes I shade that top lip, as I said in class, because it suggests that it's getting less light. For the philtrum, I just draw in one side, just a suggestion, just a little suggestion. Depends on where the light's coming from. Something like that, so it's a little bit more subtle. The bottom lip is overlapped by a little bit of the top lip, little bump. Might just emphasize that dark of that center line a little bit more, give it more sense of weight. On the bottom, don't connect up. Strongly advise you not to connect up the bottom lip to the corners, otherwise it looks fake. See how that looks a little bit fleshier because it's suggested, and you can simply just use tone. This is assuming that you're going to have time to put in details like this, but use tone to suggest it and fill the gap. It's funny actually, because if the light is coming from above, then you'll have a little bit of shadow underneath the bottom of the nose. You're going to have a shadow cast from above, from the nose. Then you have a little bit of light on the top of the mouth. Then you have shadow on the upper part of the lip. Then you have light catching here. Then you have shadow underneath the bottom lip. And then you have light catching the chin. So light, shadow, light, shadow, light, shadow, light, and a shadow underneath that. So it's got a nice pattern to it if the light is coming from a certain angle. It's coming from above. And then your mouth in 3/4, same principle. I'd still draw in that center parting, but because it's foreshortened, it's longer on this side. You can see more of it. I still put in my Cupid's bow suggestion first. A little bit more of it now. Like I said, it finishes sooner on that side because of foreshortening. Still put in a little bit of tone, a little bit of shading. Put in my philtrum. So it's just a suggestion of it. See that top lip overlaps the bottom lip slightly. A little bit of a more forceful line there. Little indents for the corners of the mouth, usually where there's a little bit of shadow because it's a hollow. And then or simple curved line from my bottom lip. And I can put a little bit of tonal work there. And that's your 3/4 million. Okay, that's your features. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, nice one. Sweet, nice one, folks. I hope you found that useful. As always, if you have any questions, please do get in touch. I'm always happy to help. And in the meantime, stay safe, folks. Take care, and I will see you next week. All the best.